It's 3:30, so I'm going to call this Metro Flood Diversion Authority Board meeting for August 26th in order. Would you do roll call, please?
Ms. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Wayland?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Here.
Mr. Grinberg?
Here.
Mrs. Sherling?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Mr. Thorstad?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Excellent. You have the minutes before you. We've had them beforehand, I believe. And if anybody has any changes or anything like that, or do I have a motion for them to be approved?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Tim, second by, I think it was Grant, I heard. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. And the minutes for the March 18th meeting are approved. Order of agenda, I have one item. We'll add, you have a handout in front of you for Sns Landscaping contracts. We'll add that as maybe 8F under the finance section.
Move to approve with the change.
Second.
Motion by Tim, seconded by Kevin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign, and the order of agenda is approved. Next item is management, PMC report. Well, Martin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. This month's report, you get a downgrade, you get me instead of Robert. Sorry about that. A review of the activities that the Diversion Authority is moving forward with over the past month. Many of these you're obviously very well aware of, and they're the combined efforts of your tech team, your Diversion Authority staff, the Corps, and others. But with quick review, obviously the coordination with Minnesota DNR and other parties to understand and move the permit application process is underway through, as I said, the very good efforts of your staff and others. I think it has produced a relationship that's moving forward in a positive manner, and I'm sure you'll hear more and more about that as time goes forward. You're also aware that Rocky and his team, and you'll probably hear more about that in his report, completed presentations to over 24 entities. Again, many of you participated in those meetings. In general, very well received, and appreciate all the hard work that everybody's gone through to make those meetings a success. In early April, micrositing workshop was held with the Corps and Diversion Authority staff to begin the process of refining the Plan B alignment. That work product is still in draft form and isn't ready for prime time, but it is important to note that work has begun and the micrositing is beginning to take shape. Obviously, the Diversion Authority has submitted a request to resume construction of in-town levees and a portion of the OHB work. That's an important question in front of the courts, and it is again moving its way through the process, moving hopefully in a manner that will allow the Diversion Authority to take advantage of this year's construction season, and that's the objective. This is really a holdover. I think these meetings in Washington, D.C. were held at the week of the last board meeting, so I think this was potentially briefed by Mayor Mahoney and others that attended in the last meeting. I think there have been some follow-up questions and answers, and again, there remains good interest from the congressional delegation in the project, and you'll hear more about that later. The progress on the federal legislation related to WIFIA and the core budget appropriations continues. We have initiated some very early financial plan update with existing cost numbers, financial plan update thinking. This is only to get an idea of where that might be headed. We're coordinating that through the Finance Committee. Nothing yet can be really finalized until you get Plan B finalized, and much later in the year you get an opportunity to revise those cost estimates. But again, that's coordinated through Tony and the Finance Committee. Mayor and others provided a project update to the North Dakota State Water Commission, and there's been a significant amount of coordination with the Corps regarding the resumption of the geomorphology study, rights of entry, coordination, and all of the work that's necessary to get the people in the field to conduct that work in anticipation of moving the project forward. Priority areas for moving forward, obviously continue to communicate and coordinate with Minnesota DNR. Outreach efforts related to Plan B will continue, particularly with respect to questions and issues that arise as it moves forward. Support for the Corps in the development of their supplemental environmental review process. There's a fair amount of technical work that has to be done to support that effort. And I don't see Carrie here today, but the Corps has gotten a fairly aggressive schedule to move forward in that. And we're trying to make sure that they're supported in everything that they need to move that forward appropriately. And again, the geomorphology study with the field work hopefully starting in May, now that the weather has improved. We're hoping that good news is obtained with respect to construction of the in-town levees and OHB. So preparations are underway to make sure that should the judge allow that to move forward, the diversion authority is prepared to go, and that's, again, your staff and the tech team and others are moving that forward. Advance financial planning as appropriate to the extent that we get additional cost information from the Corps. As Plan B gets microsited, we may be looking at trying to anticipate what that might mean in terms of funding. Continue to support and development of the WIFIA legislation. I think many of you have seen Matt Chiller's updates. Those bills are getting marked up in May. Unsure as to whether or not WIFIA will be included in those bills, but tracking that very closely as WIFIA is a very important component of the affordability of the job and being able to finance it using WIFIA. Another State Water Commission meeting in June, and I believe it's anticipated that you may be looking to talk about cost share for the state at that June meeting. And of course, continuing the flow easement valuation study, and should have results on that later on this year. And that concludes that part of the report. If there's any questions there, I'll go on to the financial status.
Looks good. I like how you included, what's going up in May, so you could sort of think about that a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Overall program status, this was reviewed with the Finance Committee yesterday. I won't go into the details of all the numbers, but essentially your program budget, and again in 2015 dollars, $2.2 billion, actual cost to date around $424 million, with a remaining program budget of approximately $1.8 billion. In terms of a fiscal 2018 cash budget, you'll recall that this cash budget was an anticipated, essentially slowdown status of about $82.5 million. Year to date, about $9.3 million has been paid out, leaving a remaining budget of about $73 million. You might notice that there's a couple line items that are negative, one of those reflecting engineering and design fees, primarily those required to support Plan B alternative and all the things that happened with the governor's task force that were not in the original budget. And at some point, you may want to either reallocate money, or you certainly have contingency in your budget to handle that at this point. So that's up to the discretion of the Finance Committee and the board. Questions?
Looks good.
Thank
you, Martin. Core, do we have anything from Core?
Madam Chair and members of the Board of Authority, Terry Williams was not able to join us today. However, she wanted to pass along information that the Colonel is intending to visit Fargo-Moorhead next Thursday on May 3. We are working on scheduling a special meeting in the diversion board. There's also been some talk about needing to get together next week for a special meeting anyway. So there's been talk about another dignitary visit as well, but the Colonel will be visiting next week, looks forward to meeting with the board, and we'll get more information out to you too as we learn more about this visit. So Terry wanted us to pass that along today.
Great, thank you. And then, are you administrative legal then too, before you sit down? Nobody in that area? No reports. Okay. Public outreach.
Roger's not.
Roger, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Anything to
Rocky
report?
Rocky, could you give a report to what you had yesterday?
Sure will. Hi, I'm Rocky Schneider with AE2S. I handed out a map up there. It's a multicolorful map. I thought it was good to get a visual representation of what Martin talked about earlier and what you all know. Over the last 6 weeks, we've done over 24 presentations about Plan B. I think we all know with the changes, there was a lot of anxiety out in the public and curiosity as well about what the changes were. And I guess thanks to everybody at the board for attending these meetings and participating in them, especially Mayor Williams and Mayor Mahoney and Commissioner Sherling. I think you all were part of the presentation teams. You know, I think what really made the difference too is there was a lot of attendance from the Diversion Authority, both public entity staff and board members. And so I think that was well received at each entity. And while every meeting's a little bit different, I think everybody appreciated us going out and doing that. There's a couple on the ones that aren't on the map. Commissioner Peterson and Mayor Mahoney were out in Bismarck as well talking about Plan B update to the State Water Commission. Yesterday at the Outreach Committee, Commissioner Campbell and Councilmember Elmer talked about doing a letter to legislative leaders in Minnesota as well, and so we're working through the appropriate channels on that to start that process as well, because while we communicating frequently with the DNR, we can't lose those other leaders that have a say in this as well, and so we want to get out to them. Mayor Mahoney's also suggested that maybe we should talk to the school districts and park districts as well, and so we are working with the Fargo School District and Park District. I think they have July sort of retreat type meetings, and while it's probably not a pressing need, they put us on the agenda for those meetings. We've also talked about getting down to the Kindred School District as well, and possibly West Fargo. So I think, as Martin said, the Plan B outreach continues. This was sort of the major haul to get out there and do this, and I think it was done well, and appreciate everybody's help.
You had quite the month, Rocky. I really appreciate all the time you would put into it.
Thank you, Mayor.
I know I had lots of back and forth, and I'm sure everybody that had a certain one did also with Rocky. Very responsive. Any comments, questions for Roger or Rocky? Anything you want to add, Roger?
No, unless Kevin chaired the meeting yesterday, if he had any comments. If not, I do not either.
No, I think Rocky covered the majority of it well. There was one area that we've been talking about, maybe a letter going out to the newly impacted areas, and we saw kind of a draft of that, and there was some recommended changes to that, and so that's in the works. I know, Mayor, you're just something that you wanted to see done too, I think so. But that's not ready yet. It needed to be reworked. So.
Yep.
Okay.
That's all. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to land management.
Mayor.
Thank you. Land management did not meet this month, but Eric is there and he can give you a brief update of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. I did this last time, too. I'm so sorry, Mark. Business Leaders Task Force, Mark.
Oh, okay. Well, if you don't mind standing there, Eric. Mark Nesbitt, representing the Chamber of Commerce business leaders. Our task force continues to get the message out there that this is critically important, but I wanted to also mention that the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC in their annual meeting had a chance to talk about how important infrastructure was, and I thought one of the comments from their annual report the community first attitude that Fargo-Moore had. Residents roll up their sleeves, help each other out, and get the job done. And I think that's what Governor Burgum mentioned too when he talked about the ability of this task force and in the Diversion Authority to reach out into Minnesota, spend that time with Governor Dayton, make those extra steps to make this project possible. So I thought it was a very encouraging message, and we'll continue to help you with getting that message out to the people of our communities. So thank you, Mayor.
Great, thanks, Mark. Finance, Tony?
Maybe I'd just mention a few things on the
On
land
land
side if I
management?
could.
Sure, Eric.
Trying to move the agenda today.
I like them standing there. We can just keep them there.
Just real briefly, as Mary noted, we did not have a land committee meeting this month. There is some activity ongoing, but probably not enough to prompt a meeting. And I know, like many of you, we welcome the opportunity to cancel some meetings from time to time, so we did cancel that. That being said, I did want to just note to the board, Martin picked on this earlier, the biotic and geomorphic activity that the Corps is going to be resuming very soon. They have had court clearance to proceed with this. It was an activity that started last year, actually over the last several years. Their contractors anticipate being out in the field in May. And so we've been working real closely with the Corps to get notice out to the property owners. There'll be actually a couple rounds of notification, and some of that activity will start again here in early May. It looks like frost is coming out, and so what they anticipate doing is placing some monuments on some sites where that they can go back to time and time again to measure how erosion might change as a result of the project, or biotic conditions might change. It's all part of their adaptive management program. And so this is a good step. I think all the permit agencies and natural resources agencies look forward to seeing this data. So just kind of wanted to make you aware of that there is some landowner contacts going on, and that field activity will be starting here in May. The other thing I would just point out is as Plan B has been rolled out, and we've been meeting with the townships and the other jurisdictions and meeting with some property owners, there's been a bit of an uptick in what we call sort of opportunistic acquisitions, people that might have their land for sale or might be interested in a buyout or those types of things. And so it hasn't been ringing off the hook, perhaps, but there's been an uptick of activity, and people are interested in knowing, how are they impacted? Are they impacted? What can we do? And so as we work through those, there's some that are fairly easy to deal with, and then there's others that maybe are a little bit sort of trickier situations. And so to handle all that, what we're planning to do is put together some policy type information that the Land Committee will discuss at the next meeting in May. And there'll be some interface with the Finance Committee, as well, as there are a few areas where we think we have sort of a responsibility to approach some property owners that have land for sale, and I think with the project impacting those properties, we have a little bit of a responsibility to reach out and talk with those property owners. So those are the few things I wanted to mention.
Okay. Any questions for Eric or Mary? Okay, thank you. Now finance.
Thank you,
Tony.
Madam Chair. Martin covered basically the overview of the budget and the cash positions, so unless there's any questions, I'll move on from that. Items 8C and D and E are going to take a little more time, but I would say that discussions continue with the technical team on getting our frame of reference and a budget around the changes with Plan B, as the Finance Committee starts to take that information in May and June to bring what's the new budget. So that the efforts are underway to get specific, as best estimates we can, around the land acquisition, the in-town protection increases, and the southern embankment changes, as well as discussions with Ernst & Young on updating our forecasting with sales tax. So our intention is that we'll have options to bring forward what some options might look like as far as Minnesota share, potentially increased federal share, with the state loan program, so that we have a target on how we're going to address the gap and the changes in the budgets. So with that said, I'll move into 8B and move the expenses for the month. with a comment of the second sheet of your handout under 8B. You see the largest amount is the title company with property purchases, representing the $941,668 of the diversion bills. So I move approval of these vouchers.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Tony, second by Chad. Any questions or comments on this item? We have a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Thorstad?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay, and that has been approved.
Item 8C then, Martin, are you take the lead on this?
Yes. Yes, Madam, excuse me, Madam Chair and members of the board. Your April recommended contracting actions begin with informational items with respect to task orders that the co-executive directors have executed. Two, one is the task order number 2, Amendment 0 for the program management services, which extends our scope through mid-October of 2018 for $4.1 million. And task order 13, Amendment 16, to add scope and budget for project changes to Houston Moore Group for about $450,000. Those that were approved by the joint board includes a task order 1, Amendment 4, rights of entry, to again, Houston Moore Group to support the rights of entry that Eric was talking about, and also extend the period of performance through December of this year for another $40,000. One that was an amendment that was approved by joint board is task order 1, Amendment 5 to ProSource Technologies, again, to accommodate relocation services and the rest in the tune of $32,500. Any questions on those, and we can move into the recommended contracting actions?
We usually have a separate motion for this one, or no?
I don't believe the first needed a motion. I believe this is the contracting action that would require a motion and action by the board.
Correct.
Move to approve.
I'll have them
So
explain it first.
it doesn't need a, right?
The previous items
Do
do not need a motion by the board. This item that's
Right.
on the screen right now, the Myers change order would
That would,
require a motion by the board. This was reviewed in detail yesterday by the Finance Committee, and I don't know, Mr. Grinberg, if you want to take the lead on that, but it is to basically add some scope and adjust the contract price to accommodate standby time and delay time through April 30th of 2018. And I won't go into detail of all of those items. I believe those are in your packet, and there are others here that can get into the detail if you have detailed questions. But it's a change order in the amount of $978,114.72.
I don't know if John wants to. I do believe that there are a number of items listed in the change
Yes.
order, but I do believe we should have a discussion from either one of you on the stand-down time, 'cause I think it's important to understand that particular piece of that. I know John led that yesterday, and we
Yes.
approved this unanimously. Finance Committee approved this unanimously yesterday. I mean, there's a number of small change orders here, but I think the one that's central to, for everyone to understand is the stand-down issue, because it's important.
and the stand down is the biggest chunk of it, the rest are small?
Correct. The stand-down time and reimbursement is the largest portion of this change order. I can do a quick review of that, and if there are any questions, try to answer them, and if there are any questions about the other items, we can go over those also. So, let me get to that one. I'm going to just back up a little bit here. So contract work in Oxbow started in 2014. There was a partial injunction of levy work issued by the court in May of 2015, and all work ceased out there. In April of 2017, there was a partial lifting of that injunction, which allowed this particular project to proceed. And I think people generally reference it as the blue area that can be done. Part of that lifting of the injunction language was a bit vague in that it said it could proceed in 2017. It didn't say anything about 2018. This project was let last summer and given the contractor given notice to proceed in August. It was a little bit over a year to complete. So work was going to extend into 2018. We felt it best to ask or at least stop work until we received clarification from the courts that their intent was to allow work in 2018. And so we stopped the contractor as of January 1st of this year. Per the contract documents, the contractor, if we're asking them to stand by on the ready to start work at any moment, they're entitled to receive payment for having those resources, whether it's labor or equipment, available to start work. That was negotiated with them. Negotiations started almost immediately with the stand down, and let me get into some of the details of this, and then we'll see if you have any questions. So to two items that are part of this change order, there's a daily rate for stand down time or reimbursement. That daily rate was negotiated to about $5,600 a day. That includes contractor labor for key staff that are standing down and available to start at any moment. That number started at around $20,000 at the contractor's original request. So unfortunately, it's been 4 months, not 1 or 2 months, so it's applied over 120 days, January 1 through April 30. The total amount of that would be $668,000 for that part of the change. There's a unit rate and lump sum standby time, a reimbursement quantity that's also included here. That's about $128,000. That includes time for the contractor to, as needed, demobilize equipment, maintain the site. There's a certain amount of weekly inspection and work to maintain barriers and keep the site secure. It also includes some shutdown time for one subcontractor and negotiated rates for potentially more equipment demobilization should that be needed. So again, a daily rate of about $5,600 applied over 120 days for a total of $670,000 plus another $128,000 of unit and lump sum standby time reimbursement. So that's about $800,000 of this change. Two other items that make up sort of the rest of this are delay costs, reimbursement, and then we're also including 25 days of liquidated damages due to missed milestone dates. So that's a deduction of $75,000. The other items are are important, but the dollar amounts are quite a bit less, and so that the total is $978,000.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yep. Joel?
I just want to ask the question, just to be clear. There was no winter suspension on this contract at all? I mean, were they intending to work January 1st through April?
They were intending to, they built the superstructure for the pump station, and they were intending to work on the inside portion of that, installing mechanical, electrical, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion for this item?
Madam Chairman.
Move for-
Question.
Chad, sorry.
Thank you, Madam
Didn't
Chair.
see you.
And I know hindsight always being 20/20, right? So look how smart I am. But one of the questions I want to ask is, projects start and stop all the time, be they a small kitchen remodel to a massive infrastructure project like this. Did we weigh the cost of letting the contractor not mobilize, or was this somehow written in the contract where if we were to be shut down, we must pay them a certain amount per day until we are not shut down?
So the question is, was there consideration of other options than just having them shut down and not demobilizing them? There were, I can't speak for everybody, but I know there were discussions about how do we do this and how long are they going to be shut down? How long is it going to take to get this clarification from the court? And at the time, this, and demobilization of a contractor of this size was estimated to be on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so looking at a daily rate and possibly a clarification from the court earlier versus later seemed logical. It was extremely difficult to look into the crystal ball and say, we know this, that, and the other thing, and this is the best option. Questions were asked, and a daily rate and a standby should the courts, should the opportunity for the courts to clarify come early was probably, in the team's opinion, the best alternative at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So my question is, are we tracking, so all these costs are because of we're being delayed, and are we going to be reimbursed for those? That's well, first of all, I hope we're tracking them, and I hope we pursue being reimbursed for them. And I don't want an answer, but just a rhetorical question. And then I just wanted to read number 11. This work includes installation of a cart path to allow golf cart, maintenance vehicle, and walking traffic between the front 9 and the back 9 holes of Oxbow Country Club, and it's $8,085. That's, if you ever want to piss people off, it's paying for using public tax dollars that's supposed to be for flood protection, paying for a golf cart path. I just think it's a small amount of money, but it's a very bad way to spend our money. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Tony?
Do you have a motion?
This is Roger. I have a question. When we get going again, is there going to be remobilization charges to get fired up again, or has that all been included in this demobilization cost?
With the standby time, there wouldn't be any remobilization costs. We're paying them to be on the ready. We did not demob them. So the bigger, broader answer is no. There would not be a remob cost. I would have to double check the details of that unit rate lump sum, $128,000. That may. If certain equipment is in the near future is demobbed, we would allow them to be reimbursed for bringing it back, but right now it does not.
Tim?
All right, thank you.
John, I just have a question. If we as a group could have a little bit of idea, we have hopes that a court might make a decision by next week. That would be one thing. If the frost is out of the ground and they're able to mobilize and move but are restricted by the injunction, I think we'd kind of like to know our options. One is break the contract, what happens then. Two is continue to pay it for a certain amount of time. But I think the board would kind of like to have three different options. You know, if the courts don't make a decision quickly or something doesn't happen, do we have some options and what would it cost us? Because this is almost retrograde. We're figuring it out. We've already negotiated down some of the charges that they had, which I congratulate you on. But I think, of course, in some ways the intent was not to stop this construction. We didn't have the power of the courts. But I just think for us, to Commissioner Pippard's comment, is that you'd hate to waste money if you can in some ways. And I guess we're going to have to ask the technical team, what is your advice? And other options often been talked about is that if people are hungry right now, maybe a rebid would be lower as well. So I just would like to know, what are you guys going to advise us?
That's actually going to be the subject of the executive session that's on the agenda. This change order addresses the claims that, the historical claims, the executive session we need to have to discuss the strategy moving forward and get some directions regarding potential claims under the Meyer contract.
Thank you,
Finance
John.
Committee approved this yesterday.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay. Motion by, who was the second?
Tony's first.
Guy running unopposed.
Motion made by Tony, second by Tim. Any other additional questions or comments on this item? We do roll call vote, please.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
No.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Thorstad?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it is passed. Next item, Tony.
Next up then, Madam Chair, if it's okay, 8D, I'm going to ask Mr. Redlinger to be the point on the agenda item, 2018 HMG rates.
Madam Chair, members of the board, very briefly, the Finance Committee yesterday received a presentation from Jeff Volk from Moore Engineering and Jeff Ledoux from Houston Engineering on the HMG rates for 2018. In your packet is some background material on the history of those rates, and we thought that that was helpful for those board members, those Finance Committee members who have not perhaps been with the project for as long as some of you have been with the project, just to show some of the history of the rate structure. And this was a tabled item from our March meeting, so we had received this information, and then upon receipt of the presentation from Jeff Volk, unanimously approved these rates for 2018 with HMG. We will continue to revisit this on an annual basis. This is for the 2018 rates, and I really appreciate the conversation. I think it was helpful for the Finance Committee as well, just to see inside a bit of the inner workings of how these rates have been developed over time. Jeff is here today, too, if there'd be any questions. Actually, both Jeffs are, but it was a very good discussion at Finance, and again, unanimous recommendation of the committee.
Well, Madam Chair, one of the, if you look at the chart there, you'll see 2017, we had extended explanation yesterday, if you will, of what we required in liability coverage and who would carry that coverage that took place in 17. And that largely represents that increase that HMG is now responsible. That was part of the contract. So, I mean, we can certainly have either Jeff or both Jeffs come up if they want to stand together and get a little deeper dive on that. But that's one of the fundamental reasons why that number is so high.
Okay. Yeah, I see that other ones were 0, and that's 8%.
There are no questions. I would just move for approval then.
Second.
Okay. Who was the second? Was Rick? Okay. Chad, you had your hands up?
I'll let
Did
it
you
go.
have Pardon me?
I'm good.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Madam Chair, this is a real, it's probably not much money involved or whatever, but can I have an explanation of what project mileage is? Is that what the reimbursement rate per mile?
Yes, that is correct.
Good afternoon. So standard in engineering contracts is reimbursable travel.
Okay.
Doesn't include any in-town travel, so it'd be if by chance one of our team has to go to Minneapolis, St. Paul for a meeting with DNR, those types of expenses for getting reimbursed for the vehicle miles.
And that is pretty much based on a vehicle type of travel, isn't it?
Correct.
I just want to note that I know in Clay County, we operate under the federal guidelines for reimbursement for those types of things, and this happens to be about 10 cents more than that, and I just want to point that out. But I know I'm nitpicking here, but it's a pretty generous amount for reimbursement for mileage.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the same rate that was negotiated 5 years ago, 6 years ago now when we started the project.
Thank you with that.
Okay. Noted, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, unless you want to make an adjustment or a motion. There's a motion on the floor, though. Is there any more comments and questions? Okay. We'll go for a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mr. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted? Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay, and that passes. Next item, Tony?
Mike will have the lead again on the amendments to the Oxbow agreement.
I'd be happy to, Madam Chair, members of the board. In your packet are two agreements that the Finance Committee considered yesterday and reviewed and unanimously recommended approval to the full board today. There are two documents. The first is being an assignment agreement of the master agreement between the Oxbow Golf and Country Club, the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, and the City of Oxbow. And the second document is an amendment, a second amendment to the MOU with the City of Oxbow and the Diversion Authority. This is an agreement that actually dates back to 2013. And so I'll get into some of the term issues that are changing. But let me first lay out the objectives. The objectives of the Finance Committee has been to try and modify that sales procedure to take the remaining lots that are available today in Oxbow and try have more direct management and oversight of that sales process by the City of Oxbow and the Oxbow Golf and Country Club. The other objective that we had was to have the city and the country club assume more of the day-to-day maintenance responsibilities for those lots, so your weed control, your mowing, and take the contract administration that we currently perform on behalf of the community. And then finally, another objective was to define our responsibilities as the authority to the relocation of the Oxbow City Park. There has been a necessitation of moving the park, and so we wanted to define what the financial responsibility was going to be for the Diversion Authority, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. So the assignment agreement is relatively straightforward. It simply moves the obligations from the joint board over to the City of Oxbow. It is an agreement that is contingent on the approval of the Second Amendment to the MOU, which is probably the agreement that is more substantive and more relevant to the Diversion Board. That MOU, as I said earlier, was entered into in 2013. It was actually October 24th of 13. At that time, laid out what the lay of the land would be for all of these new lots in the community. A total of 98 new lots at that time. 65 of those lots have been sold, and so on balance today there's 33 that remain. And then of those 33 that remain, our proposal and our concept that the Finance Committee reviewed yesterday is that the city would be in the position to sell those lots and take the first $1 million of revenue on those sales from the post-2017 lots. So what they have today, if 20 of those lots sold and that was worth $1 million, they would net that first $1 million in revenues from those sales. After that first $1 million threshold would be achieved, the Diversion Authority would again return to a position in sharing in the revenue from future lot sales and those that remain on the books. That'd be a 65-35 split with the authority receiving 65% of the revenue. We also included in this language, in exchange for the city taking on more role, more responsibility, that we would meet a minimum sales threshold. We want to make sure that there would be no fire sales, that we would actually see market value for those lots that are available in Oxbow. We maintained an 85% floor. If there was to be any kind of sale that would occur on those remaining lots, below 85%, that would need to receive the consent of the Diversion Authority through the Executive Director. After this $1 million in sales has been achieved by the city and the DA resumes responsibilities for receiving some of the revenue, we would also intend to share in the cost of the maintenance of weed control and mowing at that time. We were talking with AE2S. We estimate that those costs would be relatively modest. At that point, you might only be talking about 10 lots, 12 lots, and it really wouldn't be that large of a cost. Eric Johnson was really responsible for drafting the documents that are before the committee, before the full board, and then were before the committee yesterday. And Mike Montplaisir really helped us out to make sure that from a revenue modeling standpoint, that this made sense for the authority. Obviously, it had to make financial sense, and the answer is that yes, it does. We did a spreadsheet exercise and went through iterations of the data with Mayor Nyhoff as well as our finance professionals. And in fact, the Diversion Authority does end up slightly ahead in this arrangement, just over $62,000 ahead compared to the present condition. So the revenue assumptions have been validated. The authority will in fact be made whole and get slightly ahead. This, in exchange for that deal, will also remove the authority from the approval of golf course change orders. Change orders will be the responsibility of the Golf and Country Club as well as the City of Oxbow. And then we've also capped our obligation of the park relocation. The park relocation had some early estimates of work in the $4 or $5 and even above $500,000 mark. We're capping our obligation expressly to $200,000. And that will be just a lump sum payment, and then the community can elect to include whatever other amenities they would like to see for the park, and that will not be further subjected to the Diversion Authority and needing to fund that. We will have additional work in the future, internal drainage projects, environmental mitigation in the future. There will be activities that will come back to this board in 2019 and in 2020. But for the time being, as it relates to the lot sales that remain, as well as the change orders and the park relocation, we felt that this was a solid arrangement for the Diversion Authority. And again, it was the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee yesterday. Happy to answer any questions.
And Madam Chair, just to add then, compliment Mike and engineering staff, folks that put a lot of time into this. In essence, my words, it gets us out of the golf course business. It gets us into the diversion business.
This
And
addresses
so-
what Dave was not feeling good about.
So in my opinion, it's the right thing to do. Any additional costs come back to us are related to the diversion, not the golf course. And so we exercised a lengthy, this probably took 6 months of staff time, but I think it's the right thing to do to move on and get back to the core business and not worry about every little change order coming our way from the city of Oxbow or the golf course.
I remember seeing that one go through, but it was the safety component to it that I felt that we had to act on it versus not do it. But
And the vice chair named yesterday, Mr. Steen, did a yeoman's job as well, guiding us through this. Thank you.
good. Any other comments, questions from? Good to see
Move
you,
for
Mary.
approval.
Matt, okay, go ahead.
Did you want to comment, question? Go ahead.
Oh, this is Roger. So are we giving up on mitigation for people on the outside in the impacted backup water area and then the additional impacted people with Plan B? Or is there lots still set aside for that mitigation?
Roger, Mike here. I think if I heard your question correctly, your question was, are we going to reserve some additional lots in Oxbow for relocations? We did talk to Mayor Nyhoff about that. Based on their past experience, they didn't have many interested parties leaving the staging area looking to move into the community, although they had a couple. That can continue to be a negotiation and an item to discuss with the city. We do have some additional property that we need to buy on the wet side of the project. There are some privately held lots, but there are a variety of lots in the name of the Joint Board and Cass County that will need to be transferred over to the Diversion Authority long term. So there will be mitigation projects that continue into the future. This is really just related to the sale of the lots that remain in the inventory from the project. But the relationship with the authority will continue.
Does that answer what you were wondering, Roger?
Well, so there is some lots if somebody wants to move in. Will there be a lot available?
Yes, there's 33 lots available today. We didn't stipulate in this particular agreement that the city needed to reserve 5 lots, 6 lots. We did raise that question in the negotiation with Mayor Nyhoff, but again, the past practice has been that they were not able to really fill those reserved lots quickly. But we did have that concept discussion. We stayed silent on the issue, but we can certainly raise that with Mayor Nyhoff as we talk about future sales and opportunities there.
Well, realize those extra lots out there were for mitigation, and that was the reason that we have extra lots. And the reason that we convinced the Corps that was going to be part of the mitigation plan for the people that were impacted outside of Oxbow. So they did have an option to stay within the Kindred School District and stay relatively close to the area where they are living now. So I would certainly like to make sure that follows through at least through the DNR process until we get the okay there, so we know which people are impacted, and maybe the lots won't all be gone by then anyway. But I certainly would be in favor of making sure that we have a few lots for that opportunity.
Del Rey, I was under the impression in talking to Mayor Nyhoff, they were going to leave 5 to 6 lots until this next part goes through as Plan B and who it affects. They're aware of possibly 3 people you're talking about that might be interested. He was just saying in past history, not a lot of people chose to move on to the Oxbow lot. But I think what we can do with Mike is clarify that to make sure. And our request when we were negotiating with him was possibly another year of just keeping those lots open and then have an end date so people would know if you're going to do it, you've got till this time. So I think that'd be worth a discussion, Mike, and make sure we nail that down.
I think that's a good concept, Mayor. And I think the other thing that we can do, we're going to need to get a status report from the city about how they're doing with those lot sales at any rate, because we'll want to know when they meet that $1 million sales threshold so we know when we re-enter the deal. And I think that we can work out a report with the mayor there that gives us some information, but then we're going to have a continual dialogue with them about just that. So, Roger, your point is well taken, and we'll take that back to Mayor Nyhoff as well. Thank you for that.
Madam Chair, can I ask another rhetorical question? So I'm not that bright, but can someone explain this to me? So these lots, we built the flood protection for them. There weren't any lots there. These are lots that were created because of our flood protection, correct? And so now we're going to pay them $2.4 million, and then they're going to keep the lots and sell the lots? Is that what's going on? Really?
So what we are doing in exchange for assigning the rest of this first $1 million of sales that will occur is getting out of the golf course business with the change orders and some expected work that was going to be in the neighborhood of those dollar amounts. There's a variety of work that has yet to be completed there. We're getting insulated from golf course change orders that have already been coming across the line, in some cases several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that was the concept, was that we could get out of that business, get back to the flood protection, but then get back into revenue sharing after they finish the golf course and just get us out of the change orders.
Can I just add one more comment? I wish we would have never got into the golf course business to begin with. I think there was a few people that were against that to begin with. And the other thing that's our risk is, so golf courses, not a lot of people play golf anymore, and even less play at a golf course half an hour outside of Fargo. So what we should have made sure to include is, if this golf course has financial difficulties, we get the right to get it back, because that's what's going to happen. So we'll have paid all these millions of dollars. What if it goes bankrupt? That's the question. Why did we not get in there that if something happens, we get it back? And so it's very sad. And the saddest thing is, we're using Fargo taxpayer money that we were told was for flood protection, and it's being used for a golf course and a playground and a cart path. It's just unbelievable. Very sad. Thank you.
So the reality of what this does, Dave, we still have an obligation to the golf course out there that is already written, that was arrangements by the MOUs when we first started. So the reality of trying to negotiate this is to get us out of change orders. So what would come to this board again is multiple times we would have change orders. So Commissioner Grinberg has basically negotiated us, so that's their responsibility, and if you really want to place the responsibility, it gets back to Oxbow. So for us, it tells us what's going to cost, what's going to happen, and it's actually a safer position for us than if we stay with the present position. And for that, yes, they'll take over those things, but it's one of those things is that otherwise, the things you hate is when they come back and have change orders, which usually are 100 to 200,000 every time we see them. This really clears that up, and now you'll be happy. Most of the business, and we do have, Tony, what, $4 or $5 million work still has to be done out in Oxbow as far as flood protection issues.
Oh, at least at a minimum, yeah.
So we still have that we will have to finance, but this gets us out of it, so I strongly move for this position. I'd move to approve.
I think we already have a motion.
Oh, okay.
But just a question, Mike, you have your spreadsheet, you can show the original projection, what we were projected to net back. I think it's a little over $10 million from the sales.
Correct. What Tony's referring to, this is actually a Mike My Pleasure spreadsheet, and we didn't include this in the packet, but just to kind of show you some of the work that went into this, that's correct. We had estimated
So maybe the original,
10.9.
just the original target, and then this agreement gets us to that target. So
Yep, correct.
we're not skewing the original intent of the agreement. We're just saying, this is it. We're getting out of the business, and you're dealing with change orders.
Right. That's accurate.
The other thing I want to say is, Mike, I hope you don't take this as I'm not disparaging you, because I know that you're all doing excellent work. I just think it's just a sad position that we've put ourselves in.
He's got a hell of a tee shot. You should see him swing.
They won't let us play out there, I can promise you that.
Madam Chair.
Mary.
Thank you. I just want to echo Roger's concerns that we have a totally different project now, a totally different group of folks that are going to need to find alternate housing. And I don't want to give this up, and I certainly have no objection to saying no to some change orders either. So I'm kind of understanding where Commissioner Pepcorn's coming from there. But at the very least, we need to be preserving some other opportunities for homeowners to move that, we're going to need, I think.
Jen.
Maybe to make sure the horse has thoroughly been beaten. To reiterate exactly what Mayor Mahoney said, during our roundtable briefing with the City of Oxbow, when Mr. Benson presented after the fact, I talked to Mayor Nyhoff, and this was a topic of discussion regarding what are we going to do, reserving these lots, or are we all selling these lots? Mayor Nyhoff was more than receptive to whatever we need to be doing. His end goal, the city's end goal, is to fill all the lots. So if we can expedite that while simultaneously helping people that are impacted, it's a win for everybody. So Mayor Nyhoff didn't resist that concept at all, so it should be a pretty easy ask.
And I think that once this project is rolling along, those lots will be sold. I mean, people are, I'm guessing, just waiting. I mean, it's a mess out there right now.
They're just wondering where it's at.
And once things get settled, I think they will go.
Do you want to add an amendment that states we keep some lots for those people?
I think that would be wise.
I would be a little nervous and cautionary on that. I would say then we table this and then go back and update a spreadsheet just to make an amendment without how that financial interplays of all the work and projections at this level of a meeting. Maybe Mike, you could come up with that's my thought.
Right. We could certainly do that. And I would just add, too, with the lots that remain, they actually are in much different price points than some of the first lots that were on ponds and on water features. There's going to be an opportunity, I think, if the authority has some goals reserving certain types of relocation lots. There is more affordable lots that are going to be available this time around. And then in that group of 33, there's also still some pretty prime position lots as well. But I guess I would concur if the board would like to table this, we'd be happy to talk to the mayor about a reserve threshold, and maybe we could try to figure out a performance timeline there that he has to reserve these for a period of time, and then they're available for general sale based on their absorption rate. If the market stayed where it was at, it would still take them a period of years to sell what they have. But they actually have had some pretty good success the last 2 years with construction activity, which has been good and certainly good for the Kindred School District. But we'd be happy to take that back to the mayor if that's the direction of the board.
Okay. Kevin?
I fully support tabling this. I agree with Roger's original comment. This was at least in my opinion, it was an important mitigation piece that we had, and that was the ability to have an alternative for those who are going to be asked to be misplaced for another place to go. And I think of those 33 that are remaining, I think we should insist upon a certain number of those being available for that purpose. And if it's okay in an order, I'd move to table the motion.
Well, Madam Chair, just a point of order, why don't I just withdraw the motion?
Oh,
That way we don't have-
I was just going to.
Yeah.
Great, okay.
Okay.
So staff has, you're good, okay.
Good, thanks.
And we will, unless there's other comments, we'll move on from this topic. Okay, till next time. And then F, Tony, if you wanted to do that, or is that just John? Did you have a chance to look at that as a finance committee?
We did. I'll ask John to provide an overview of that. That was another good discussion, and we did adopt this yesterday, or recommend passing this. John will take it.
Okay, this is on the Sns Landscaping Agreement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is my apologies for a late add to the agenda. We had a late addition into the package. This is a contract with Sns Landscaping to provide some seeding, both grass and tree replanting for areas that are covered by the stormwater permit that's issued by the North Dakota Department of Health. We currently have a number of projects which are on standby mode. That's 16, 17, and also in areas of Oxbow that need seeding to comply with the stormwater permits. This didn't become an issue until the weather started getting nice, and we're concerned that there'll be rainfall and release of sediment into the waterways. The technical staff did submit bids from the contractors that had either been demobilized or were on site. Those bids were higher than what was received by Sns Landscape. This agreement covers about 33 acres of area that'll need to be seeded either with grass or some sapling trees that were wrecked as part of another project. It does provide the authority to have limited notices to proceed if those other contractors correct those issues. This is a project we really need to undertake so that we're in compliance with the stormwater permit requirements. Is about $150,000. They are required to maintain the weeds as the grass starts to grow. So I can certainly answer any legal questions. John Glatzmeyer can answer any of the technical questions, but it's pretty straightforward. It's a seeding for open areas due to the stormwater permit requirements.
So they maintain the seating so it gets started, or, okay.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't get started, they need to reseed?
Yes.
Okay. Any
Move for-
questions?
Move for approval.
A motion by Tony. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Dave. Any more comments or questions on this item? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mr. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay, and it's approved for the contract with Sns Landscaping. Thank you, John. Do we have any other business beyond the executive?
Madam Chair, just a
Yeah.
point of reference. if I may.
Yes.
I am working with the EDC to update our financial impact report that we had. It was created a number of years prior to this project, and I presented to the Diversion Authority, I think, 2 years ago. So we're getting new numbers regarding in-migration population for work as well as total economic impact. So when that gets completed and updated, I'll give the Diversion Authority a briefing.
Okay, great.
Can I
Thank
add
you,
something to
Ted.
that?
Yep,
Madam-
Dave.
We just did our assessment with the total amount of land value for the city, and I'm sure the county did the same thing. I think we should try to update a lot of those numbers, and I'm sure Clay County and Moorhead, the valuation of property is going up tremendously, and I think that would add a little bit to our argument showing how much, like, I think just the city of Fargo was 15 billion was just the property. And so if we added all of ours together with the new numbers, I think anyway, if that makes sense, I don't know if that ties with what you're talking about, but if you add all those together, it's a lot bigger number than our original number by leaps and bounds, I believe. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So then from there, we have do I have a motion to go into executive session? Is this your thing, Dave?
Well, I hope so, but
I know
actually,
you love it.
if it's okay with you, I'll just say I recommend the motion and not read the whole damn thing.
Second.
Does that work, John? Because he makes us go through.
Okay, John?
Yeah, it's on. Public. The purpose of the executive session is to talk about the Meyer contract and the pending claims, so.
See, I try that
Real
in the
knows what-
city, and he always makes me say the other stuff, so. All those in favor of going to executive session for that stated purpose signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, and we're going to executive session.
This is all the meetings for?
Oh, okay.
Second.
It's motion by Kevin, second by Chad to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Thank you.